So welcome. For many of you, welcome back. We're so glad you're here. I am Nicole Bryant-Lesher. I'm English faculty at College of the Redwoods and a coordinator with 3CSN. And this is my amazing colleague, Rebecca. Rebecca, you want to say good morning?
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Rebecca Moonstone, and I'm here to assist you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat, and we will make sure at that time that you will get your question answered.
Absolutely. And that includes technical kerfuffles, one of my favorite words in the world, technical kerfuffles, right? If you can't hear me, or you're trying to unmute yourself because we're having open dialogue time, or you can't reach the Google document, or any of those things, go ahead and reach out to Rebecca. And with her fingers of fire, she will help us. No pressure there, Rebecca. She will assist you with her cape, with her magic cape that is hidden carefully beneath the back of her tunic. She will help you. We're going to get rolling here in just 1 second. Millie sent me a wonderful question via email. Thanks, Millie, for the question. And since it's germane, I thought I would start with that, and then we'll go ahead and make our way over to the Google document. And Millie's question was, hey, I can't seem to find that link for our recorded session last week. I've got everything else, but I don't have that recorded session. And Millie, that's a great question. Where is that session? To my knowledge, it may not be fully done being recorded and set to go, right? So we are small but mighty as an organization, and there's a single amazing human, her name is Keelan, who does all of our video editing, formatting, and uploading to our YouTube channel. So as soon as that recording is ready to go, as soon as she's looked it over and done all of the things she needs to do to make sure that it's accessible in all the ways that that needs to happen, she will have that up on the YouTube channel. And as soon as she lets me know, I will let all of you know. Okay, so I will get that to you just as soon as that pancake is off the griddle, but know that it's in process and cooking. So since this is our second week together, right, I'm going to utilize that previous connection that we already have to move us into our doing just a little bit faster. So I'm going to move us in just a moment onto that Google document, but I do want to always take that minute to stop and invite us to look at our community agreements, our norms. We've now been together for a week. You might have new thoughts about ways in which we can support each other in this online learning environment. And you might feel like what we did last week worked really well. Either way, it's good to stop here and pause for a moment to remind ourselves of kind of the best ways we can be when we're learning with each other. So what we currently have is on the screen. And I want to give you just a minute to look those over. And if there's anything we should add, any additional ways of being or ways of thinking that we should add to our community agreements, go ahead and type those right in the chat to Rebecca. And if these are looking good, feeling good, then you can, if you want to give yourself a little practice with it, use one of your reaction buttons. Those are down by the chat. I believe that's where they are, is down by the chat. And you can give a thumbs up. Let us know these are looking good. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Rick. I find in my classroom that the first week that we engage with norms, it's often what we call a threshold concept, right? That naming how we want to be together and surfacing that's something one could do. is kind of mind-blowing in its own space for students, and that they're co-making them with me, right? But that might also mean that you know, that kind of, that's it for week 1, right? And then as we get into week 2 or later into the semester, the more I re-invite my students to come back and look at those community agreements, the more dynamic they become, right? The more their lived experience in the class and their lived experience in other spaces starts to shape their ability to help co-create those. So in that same vein, as we continue to work together this week, next week, etc., I'm always going to invite us back here and know that these are always available to be added to, made more strong and complex and rich through all of you. With that, let's go ahead and make our way into a workspace that's going to work for us. So if you've not yet done so, I invite you to our Google document. The link for that is in the chat. It's going to be our main workspace for this session. Just going to give a quick view of what that looks like. You'll know you're at the Google document if it says Canvas Gradebook and Feedback Series Part 2. It's got our date on it. And if that first table looks a little different. Last week, we had a table that really wanted you to kind of name why you're here. Now we're going to add a layer of complexity to that, really get our metacognitive thinking going as we use that table and continue to work together. So we're going to get to this in just a moment. But if you found it, awesome. It's all you need to have at the moment. You've got it. You know it's there. Just like last week, I would also invite you to prep 2 other things, right? Have that Google document at the ready. We're going to be working on it. Second, anything else that you personally might want to refer to, right? In this session, you're not going to need to share your screen or anything like that. You might want to do that when we get to peer review down the road. But in this case, it's really just anything you personally would want to look at to help your thinking or your dialoguing. So maybe that means logging into Canvas, right? Maybe that means having a document up that you're thinking about. These are really just references for you, but having them ready is going to make that kind of digital scramble when you want something a whole lot easier. And then last but not least, someplace for note-taking. A notebook, a digital document. Our Google Docs are going to capture most of what we do. And then I've got additional resources for you as well. But sometimes it's really nice to have a piece of paper to write on when a thought comes up to you, right? So if you've got those pieces good and ready to go, let's go ahead and hop on over to the Google document. So what I'm going to invite you to do is to take 5 minutes and reflect and add those reflections to this table. So this table is a variance on something that we do lots in 3CSN. You can do it in your classroom. You can do it in meetings. It's really helpful for activating schema, right? Starting from a place of what you have, thinking about what you need. So you'll add your name and your college, and then add something in this column that says, I got, right? So something that you learned in our previous session that's clearer to you now, or something you already know about this week's content, right? We're going to be talking about how to give feedback in Canvas. So what's something you've got? Something already in your knowledge bin. And then from there, add something that you need, right? Maybe this is a question you've got going, or a challenge, a hiccup that's still there. Or maybe you're hoping to engage with some new resources, or you know you need something and you just don't have it yet. So what have you got? And what do you need? We're really going to focus our time on these 3 blue categories to the left right now. We're going to come back to the white categories as we get a little farther into our work in the session. So what have you got and what do you need? Once you feel like you've said what you want to say for your gots and your needs, take the time to take a look at the gots and needs that are happening from the colleagues around you on the table. Where are they in their process? What gots do they have that you might be able to learn from? What needs do you share? Do you find that you have a partnered question with someone else? Sometimes when we're looking to learn something new, we're starting from a question that we have, right? And so some major questions that I think our learning today is going to help answer. First, how do I comment on student work submitted on Canvas, right? Once my students complete something, they put it on Canvas, what are my options for giving feedback on that? Not just how do I put a numeric grade, right, in a spot, but how can I create a conversation with my students about the work that they've done through the features that Canvas gives me? Okay. And then more specifically, not just what are the tools, right? How can I use those tools? But when I use those tools, how can I use those tools to support student revision and strengthening? So if I approach giving feedback as a dialogue, right, with the student and to help the student learn, then what moves can I make in the way in which I give feedback that are going to increase the support to my student, increase the likelihood that my student takes that feedback and says, okay, this is what I need to do. I'm ready to keep working towards that next step. Or now I know what isn't working and I feel empowered to continue to revise and try, right? So not only do I want to be able to give them feedback, but I really want to think about how do I make that feedback work to be as impactful for my students as it possibly can be. Right? And then that question we're going to continue to come back to because it's thorny, because it's hard for students. How do they access that feedback? Right? We'll walk through that process again, give you a look at it, and again, suggest some tips to help your students see that feedback that you give them. So we're going to go ahead and head to Canvas to show you a few things, right? How to access and use the commenting features and where those live, how to use those comment features to respond to student work and motivate strengthening and revision, and help students interact with their version of Gradebook and their feedback. So this is really the only slide that I have for us as kind of our theoretical frame for the work that we're doing. And it's quick. It's to let you know that there are several different ways that you can give feedback in Canvas, okay? You can give written feedback in a number of different ways, and you can give audio or video feedback in a number of different ways, and I'm going to model those for you, okay? Canvas organizes its learning activities into different types. And this is something you probably already know if you've been using Canvas for a course, but saying it helps to keep in mind that not all types of feedback are available on all types of graded activities. Some are, but not all. So for example, if I want to give overall comments back on an assignment, I can do that with any type of graded activity. I can give overall comments back on a quiz. I can give overall comments back if a student uploads a document and that was their homework or an essay or whatever, right? I can give overall comments back if students type into a text box, and I can give overall comments back if students engage in a discussion, right? Using the discussion form. If I'm giving written feedback, and I want to go in and actually give like line by line feedback or edit or annotate something that they've uploaded, it has to be the type of assignment where they've uploaded something, right? I can't go in and give line by line feedback on their response in a discussion. That's just not an option that Canvas gives me. And we're going to get into this more, how to do that commenting in the margins of a student paper, how to do that line by line editing in our 4th session. So just know that that's coming. We got time set aside for that. Overall comments work for everything written. Margin comments, they got to upload something for you to be able to give feedback on it. If you're interested in a situation that would allow for you to give instant feedback, right? You don't have to type it. It's already waiting there for students. A quiz might be the type of learning activity that you want to set up so that if it's a kind of question where students answer one of 3 ways, and with each way they answer, you give them, they're immediately connected with feedback, a quiz is a great way to do that. Depending upon the type of questions that you design, you can set those up so that when a student answers, they get instant feedback. Right? It doesn't have to wait for you to get there and get into Gradebook to give it to them. Audio, video feedback, audio comments can be created in Canvas, right? There's also an internal tool with uploading options. I'm going to show all that to you. So any type of graded activity, you could give audio feedback on. Any type of graded activity, you could give video feedback on. Okay? Any type of graded activity, you can create written comments by using the speech to text feature. And we're going to walk through all of that in the next few minutes. So if the frame of how you gave feedback just got a lot wider, just know these are choices, right? That are available to you to whatever extent they're helpful. My personal motto with Canvas is a little at a time, right? Take on one new thing, know there's other new things available later, but you'll know they're there. So let's go take a look at how we would use these. Okay. So imagine this is your course. Here you are in your modules. Imagine that you've assigned some activities to your students. Let's say you assigned them an essay and you assign them a discussion. Okay, these were the 2 assignments that you made. An essay where they uploaded something, right, a paper, and a discussion where they were communicating with each other on a discussion forum. Anytime I go to give feedback, I'm going to get there by going to the Gradebook. And I get to the Gradebook by choosing grades. I click on it. It's going to take me to my Gradebook. Remember, we were here last week. If you were here with us last week, remember that this looks different from your class because I'm in a fake class, right? I'm in my sandbox, which means the only student who's here is my lonely artificial test student, otherwise known as me, right? So if it looks like my class is really, really small, it is. It's just this test student that I can make fake assignments for and then upload fake, fake homework for in response. But it gives us a great place to practice. So I'm going to slide us over to this essay assignment. And if I want to give a grade, right, I could just click on this icon. If there's an icon in there, right, that says a student has submitted something, right? I could just click on that and give them a score. But a score by itself isn't really feedback, right? Like in the most basic sense, a score tells the student how close to the goal they reached based on your evaluation. But it's an observation rather than an observation plus direction. By choosing to give feedback beyond a numeric grade, you're making that really powerful combination where you say, okay, the grade is one thing. That's how I evaluated this moment. That's my observation on your current body of work here, right? Whatever this assignment is. But if I choose to give written or audio or video feedback on top of that, what I'm doing is creating the bridge from what they've done to what I want them to do. My feedback becomes that bridge that says, okay, right now you're here. I believe you can get here. This is what you need to do to get there, right? Or here's how I can help you get there. And that feedback, I cannot communicate emphatically enough, is so, so valuable to students, right? Those coaching words that get them into a deeper understanding of where they are and how they're going to get from where they are to where you want them to be, where they want themselves to be, make the difference, especially in an online class, between students who feel like they have what they need to keep trying and students who might feel like that failure or that low grade or even that mid grade defines what's possible for them. Right? So feedback is really, really critical. So I could just give a score here, but I'm going to choose to do more than that. I'm going to choose to come over to the right. Okay, so I clicked in this box. I could put in a score, but I also, when I click in this box, I get this little arrow to the right. I'm going to click on that arrow. One more moment to promote that if you do not currently use a mouse with your computer for grading or anythinging in Canvas, it's $12 of well-spent money, right? If you're trying to do all of your work in Canvas with a touchpad, you might just want to consider the amazing possibilities of a mouse and how much easier it is to reach all these tiny little icons and buttons that are placed in here. So once I choose that little arrow, it's going to give me the strip on the right. And I have some choices. Again, I could add my grade. I could choose to label that as late or missing or excused, remembering from our last session that these are my own labels for myself as a teacher. They do not show for the student, right? So if I want to color code this for me, I can do that. But what I'm really here to do is give them feedback at this moment. So in order to do that, I'm going to go down this hallway called Speedgrader. So I can give them a grade at this kind of basic level in the gradebook. But if I want to interact more fully, I need to go into the Speedgrader function. And the door that's going to take me to that hallway becomes available to me if I click either on this arrow, see Speedgrader right there on the right, or if I click up here on the top 3 buttons, these 3 little circles, I can also get to Speedgrader that way. It's the same spot, it's just 2 different doors to the same hallway, whichever one feels good to you. Once you click on it, you're going to be able to fully interact with that assignment. So in this case, since a student uploaded a paper, on the left-hand side of my screen, I'm going to see that paper, right? And on the right-hand side of my screen, I'm going to have all these different functions so I can interact and give feedback with that assignment. There's this darker gray vertical line that sits between the two, and with my finger very carefully or with my mouse, I can click on these 3 little buttons and adjust the width of the split screen, recognizing that any way you do it, stuff's still really small. So you might have to go back and forth between making the paper bigger and then making the grading space bigger, but you can adjust that with that bar. Once I'm in here, I'm given a lot of choices of how I give feedback. At the most basic level, I can put a score in. So maybe I read this paper and I think, this is a 16 out of 23 based on whatever my decision making is. And when I click that score in, it's going to update for my student. If I've built a rubric, I can use that rubric to give them feedback. Worry not, rubrics is where we're going next week. We're going to talk about how to build them, how to use them. So just know that they're one of the features, if you've built a rubric, that will show up, and they become part of the way in which you can give feedback on student work. So if you've built a rubric, it will live there. If you haven't built a rubric, it won't. You just won't see this. You'll see the score. And then down here, regardless of the type of graded activity, you will see these 4 buttons and boxes at the bottom. Excuse me, I just jumped. Whoops, let me bring you back. So sorry. There we are. Poor Keelan will have to edit that now. Thank you, Keelan, for all you do. Our communications coordinator, for my video glip there. All right, so at the bottom, you're gonna see 4 boxes that are always available. The first box says add a comment. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And this might be what you've used before, right? So in this add a comment spot, you can type comments to your students about that paper. So this is where goal 1 and goal 2 of me modeling are going to come together, right? First, I advocate that you give feedback beyond simply a score. Second, I'm going to model how that feedback might motivate a student to continue to try, right? So 16 out of 23, it's kind of a mid-level score. A student might feel stuck, right? They did some things right, but there's still, quite a bit for them to grow. So in general, when I construct my feedback, I'm going to start by observing, by noticing what I observe, right? So I'm going to say, hello, Bob, whatever our student's name might be, right? Hello, Bob. I noticed, right? Your essay had a strong and passionate focus on maybe, how about focus on ecology through modern zoos and their educational programming. I'm totally making this up as we go. That's okay. We'll just make it up. If this was the topic of the paper, right? I'd have a much stronger knowledge base going into my feedback. Let's say I noticed that your essay had a strong and passionate focus on ecology through modern zoos and their educational programming. You included focused and relevant sources. You met the assignment requirements in terms of paper length. Nicely done, right? I also noticed that you had some sentences focused on why this issue matters. But there's room to expand this, right? So I've made some noticing observations, right? I notice what's going on here. I've observed this. I think this is working really well. And I've also observed this, right? I've noticed that you've got some sentences focused on why this issue matters, but there's room to expand, right? And then I'm going to give a specific suggestion, right? In order to expand, I suggest, and then it really depends on your class. You could say, I suggest you revisit chapter 2 that talks about 5 ways to make an issue relevant for the readers, or you could add those ways here, whatever feels right for you and your discipline, but something that gives them a specific to do in response, right? In order to expand, I suggest you reread the last half of chapter 2, where it talks about making an issue important to a reader. There are great tips available in there to help you with your next project. Depending upon your specific situation, just contextualize how they can strengthen as it's relevant to what's coming next in your course. If they can revise this assignment, great. You can make those comments about how to revise. If they can't revise, think about what are the knowledge leaps that they're going to need to carry forward, right? What was the knowledge within this assignment that becomes necessary in whatever they're doing next? And then that suggestion of where to take their time, their energy, and their focus can go towards where they're going next in your course, right? In my opinion, this does two things. First, it really helps students to recognize that revisiting the work or strengthening in areas that they have not yet strengthened on for this assignment is relevant to where they're going next, right? Creates that bridge. It communicates that you believe they can continue to strengthen. So it gives them that motivation to continue to strengthen, right? And it helps kind of that forward looking, right? It's the anticipation. When you do this next thing, which is my way of saying as a teacher, I think you're with us for the long haul. I think you're going to do this next thing. And that it's still possible for you to be successful. So you're really helping set up that bridge to carry them forward, to think about the relationship between what they did here and where they're going next. Whatever that next might look like for your class, right? So really thinking about those bridges between assignments. So if I've typed this up, I've got my observation, right? My first few sentences are really observing. I'm specifically talking about what I see. And then I'm talking about what I see that seems to be really moving in the direction it needs to. I'm talking about what I see that isn't yet where it needs to be, not yet, right? And then I'm offering some specific suggestions for continued learning, or if it's relevant, revision that they can do. And then I'm going to hit submit. And that comment's going to go in. So this is the most universal, most basic way that you can give feedback on a student assignment. Okay. You can just type into this comment box. You can type as many comments as you want. Okay. So that's most accessible for you, easiest, good to go. If you do that, it's great. That works. If you want to mix it up a little bit, create some other ways to give feedback, the buttons beneath are ways to expand upon what you could do with your written comments here. So let's say that I've been teaching this essay 2 for multiple semesters, or I have a big class, and as I'm reading them, I notice that, over half the students are struggling with the same thing. If you've been teaching a course for a while, I bet you know by unit which concepts are going to be the really sticky ones for students. What type of feedback you're going to have to give over and over and over again. So it's powerful to give individual comments, but if there's some real specific steps to strengthen that you're going to end up saying to 40% of your class, because that's just what learning looks like, right? At this moment in class, you could choose to have a separate document that you create that has those steps on it, right? So for example, when I teach argument, the first time I teach argument in a class, sometimes folks really struggle to know what's an argument and what isn't. And so I have some steps to help them go back and recognize if something is an argument. And it's like 3 paragraphs long. I don't want to write that every time in here. And that's a lot for a student to absorb in this space. So I'm going to make some small, specific, focused comments to each student. And then I'm going to choose this paperclip right over here on the left. And when I click that, it's going to pull to my computer and my own files, and I can attach a document. So right beneath my comments here, I could say, I've uploaded a handout with the top 5 ways to make an issue important to a reader. Please look over this handout. It is attached right here alongside my feedback. Click this button. It's going to give me a choose file, right? I can choose a file. Let's do using class time well. Let's grabbing a file from my computer. And then as long as I choose submit, that's going to show up as a hyperlinked upload right beneath that comment. So it's one way to straddle between wanting to give really tailored feedback that's going to help your students bridge to that next place or revise, whichever's appropriate, and managing your time, managing, what it looks like to give that really in-depth feedback, especially if it's something you're going to say a lot, right? It's giving a resource alongside your comments. The two boxes to the right, middle and right, are other ways to give feedback other than written. So this box in the middle that kind of looks like a trapezoid with a triangle is your AV options. If you click on this, it's going to give you a white pop-up box. If I wasn't already using my face for our Zoom meeting, it would give me the option to do audio and video. But since my camera is already busy here, right, it magically knows that, and it gives me the option for audio. Okay, so I can give audio feedback to my students. The recorder is built right in, so I literally can just click this button. It's going to count me down, and I can start recording. And I'll know that Canvas is catching me if I see the blue button that's coming across while I speak. This timer on the right is going to let me know how long I've spoken for. In general, and I use audio feedback a lot, I'll talk more about how to do that with accessibility in just a minute. But when you're giving audio comments, I would say 4 minutes or less is really good, right? You want to think about students' internet bandwidth. You want to think about your own internet bandwidth and about their cognitive bandwidth for getting feedback, right? So 4 minutes is about what's possible. Beyond that, you might get somebody who's pretty overwhelmed, right? So as you're speaking, it's going to record. When you're done speaking, you just choose the finish button. It's blue. You can title it if you want to, but it goes directly onto this assignment and directly to the student. So you can also just hit save. Canvas will do its thing, and then ta-da, look, there's your recording. Shows up as a giant blue button. Students can listen right to it, and it sits right in the same place as your comments. So if your question is, are individual comments to students, do they need to be captioned? My answer is that per my understandings, when I work with the folks who know more than I do on my campus, that what you need to make sure of is that however you're giving feedback works for your students individually, right? And so the way in which I handle this is that I send out an email to the class and I say, I'd love to be able to give you feedback in a number of different ways as feels appropriate for the assignment, whether that's written, audio, or audio and video. Please let me know your preferences. If you would like only written feedback, I'm happy to do that. If you're comfortable with audio or audio feedback, please let me know that as well. I'll meet your preferences. That, because it is individual feedback to students and not a lecture video for the class, etc., meets accessibility requirements, right? Because I'm asking each individual student to let me know their preference. I'm also not defaulting, right? I'm not saying I'd like to give you audio feedback. If that doesn't work for you, let me know, which could put a student in an uncomfortable position. Instead, I just send out the email. You let me know your preferences. I make a note, and we go from there. What I have found is that audio feedback is probably one of the most powerful options I have for creating connection in an online class. just like making online lecture videos where you see their face, right? When they can hear your voice talking about their work, it makes a huge difference. You know, when we read stuff, we're imagining whatever voice is in our head, right? We're using our own voice to annotate it. And that can be really challenging, especially for students who are struggling. If a student struggles on an assignment, even if I've been really careful about what I write up here, they're receiving that feedback through the filter of that grade and whatever space they're in, right? And that's going to still be true to some extent when I make audio comments, but I can choose to decide how my voice sounds when I communicate that they have things to strengthen. And so I can choose to say, this is working really well. This over here, I can see that this is a struggle. That's a struggle for a lot of folks. Here's what I suggest that you do, and reach out to me if you have questions. And I believe that we can get there. Just take this one step at a time. And that conviction in my voice and that care in my voice comes alongside that grade. And I have students reach out on a regular basis in emails to me personally, or they'll talk about it on discussion forums with each other, where they say, I was really worried about turning this in, but it was so great to have audio comments. It helped me understand better what was going on. And it made me less nervous. So to me, that's a win. Right? There's a lot to be gained from that. I also find in an online environment that audio commenting makes me less tired. If I'm going assignment by assignment by assignment and I'm in that digital environment, it's a little closer to having a conversation with a student. It feels a little less distanced. And I think that probably makes me a better commenter too. I'm remembering there's a student on the other end of that thing that I'm doing, and it feels more real. And that probably makes me a little bit more mindful about how I communicate what I'm communicating. So for a million reasons, consider the audio comment. You can do video too. Video is going to take more bandwidth on your end. It's going to take more bandwidth for them to open. So in this case, I think audio is a sweet center spot. If you have a student that says, I would prefer typed comments only, not a problem, right? You can either use the typed comment box here, or if you love what it feels like to speak your comments to students, but they prefer them written, the box on the right is your home for that. Click on this thing that looks like a speaker. It's going to open up a pop-up box, and that's your speech to text box. In order to make it work, you simply click the red button on the right, takes it from stop to go. And then if you're, similar to me, maybe you grew up in the Midwest, maybe fast talking is just the way in which you are in the world, you're going to slow yourself down just a little so that that speech to text can accurately capture what you say. But it's pretty good at getting the words correct. What it does not do is add punctuation. But that's okay. You're going to want to check it over anyway. So you can just communicate your ideas. It's going to capture them. When you're done, click the black box. And then it's ready for you to edit right down here in a type box, just like you would if you were typing comments. So you can come right in and be like, oh, that's the end of a sentence. I need to put a period there, right? If there's changes you need to make, you can make them. Oh, fast walking is just the way in which you are. I am also a fast walker, but here I meant talking, right? So that was the inaccurate word. So I'll get that up and corrected. Say comma, but it's pretty good at getting the words correct, period. So you can go in and do a little bit of adjustment, but it's not bad. And then you just choose submit, and it shows up in the exact same location as if you typed it. So if you've had a long day of grading and the idea of typing in one more box makes you want to type, pull your hair out, maybe use the speech to text. It's a great way to mix it up that has no discernible effect on what your students see so long as you go in and edit it. They're going to encounter it the same way they would a written comment. So that's a lot of modeling for you. And I'm going to bring us back to our Google document for some open time for questions and answers. Rebecca, I bet you've got some there.
I do, ma'am, indeed.
Fantastic. What I'd love to do to capture these, since the recordings do take a little while for folks to get to them, can you give me a couple of those questions? I'll pop them in here in bullets and then we'll tackle them as we go.
I sure can. I'll put them in the
Love
chat.
it. I'm ready.
All right. As I ask the question, I'll put them in chat too also for you.
I feel so, we are on it today, Rebecca. Multimodal. All right, I'm ready.
Okay. Does your list of written feedback include comments embedded in rubrics, or is that something you will cover at a later session?
Excellent. I'll be back to that one in a moment. Great question.
Okay. How does this method of feedback work with group projects? And is there a button to click so it goes to all participants in the group?
Great question. All right. I'm ready. Any more?
No, ma'am. That's it so far.
Okay. List of written feedback for comments and rubrics. We'll talk about that more next week, but what I would say is that the rubric gets really big if you have a lot to say about what you want them to do, right? So like if the feedback I would give to strengthen is more than a couple sentences, right? If it really requires me to kind of go over a concept or to walk them step by step through 3 or 4 things, then I think it's going to be useful for me to have a handout for them rather than to put that all into the rubric, because the rubric gets really big. Plus, I think the handout's great because students can download it, put it on their desktop. They don't have to look at the rubric to have that coaching material. So I often partner. I think about my communication as being kind of like interwoven, right? More in-depth step-by-step support's probably going to go in a handout. Brief references maybe to the handout and or brief support's going to go in the rubric. And then some specific brief comments, either audio or typed. And I'm just going to kind of work with those in partnership. 2, I find that the stuff that ends up on a handout often gets tailored by class, right? There might be 6 things that in general students really struggle with, but each class isn't going to probably struggle with all 6 of those things, right? It might be 3 or 4 that are more or less for one group than another. So having that handout allows me to specifically tailor in a way that then I don't have to mess with the rubric. It's easier in my mind to edit a document than to edit a rubric that might be connected to more than one class, if that makes sense. Question 2, how does this method of feedback work with group projects? Great question. It really depends on what you're doing with the group project, right? So if each group, if you've set up your assignment that everyone in the group gets the same score, okay, regardless of their individual performance, then what you could do is you could type up group feedback. It's what I've done in the past, right? Here's my feedback to this overall group. I watched your group presentation. Here's what I noticed, right? Here's where I'd suggest strengthening. And then I can, probably the easiest way is to upload that same document to everyone in the group and then let them know that those comments went to everybody, right? You could have some brief comments to each individual group member and then say, I've also attached feedback that I gave to everyone in your group. The other thing that you can do is if you organize folks into groups for an assignment, you have an option to email just your groups, right? When you go into your email function, you can choose student groups that you've made, and you could choose to email them that attachment of that feedback or just put it in the body of an email, and then just simply reference it. down here in your feedback, right? I've given you a couple comments, but I've emailed your group for more extensive feedback on this project. In order to do it once and not have to copy it, Canvas does not have a function that allows for that, to my knowledge, right? Each individual student has their own sort of grading and comment hub, even if they're working on a group project. Great questions. More questions or thoughts on those questions? Other folks that have other approaches, things that have worked well that you'd like to share with us? You can unmute yourselves, or if you've sent them to Rebecca, that works too.
Hello. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Janice here.
Hi, Janice.
Hi, I just have a question in regards to, like, for example, when I'm using the Speedgrader and I'm not specifically being very structured in the way I grade, so a lot of students end up getting the same amount of points. And it seems like there's an auto point that populates. So for example, I'm grading a video application, student 1, 10, student 2, 10, student 3, 10.
Right.
Even though most of my students are getting a 10, the system gives me options such as an 8 or a 6 or a 4 that I don't really use. Is there a way to get rid of those auto, or make, give the command to that specific assignment to automatically populate the 8 and I just click enter for it to show up?
Let me, to my
tricky.
knowledge, you can go in on an assignment. Let me go back to our gradebook. And I don't know if I'll be able to model it because I only have one student, and that makes it kind of weird. But I believe, okay, so if you're at the gradebook, right? Let's imagine you have 30 students, right? You can come over on the right in the buttons here, and you can choose set default grade.
Okay, there it is.
And I believe, let's just go on a thought adventure and see what happens here. I believe if you click on this, give all students the same grade by entering and submitting a grade value below.
Yeah,
And then I think what happens, and you'll have to try it, I think what happens is that you could give everybody, 18 out of 25, right? And then I think you can go in and individually change it, but that's the thing that you'd want to check, is to make sure that if you put in that default grade of 18, that it doesn't eliminate your ability to then manually change it. So that's going to go on my list of research questions, is to get you more information on how the default grade works and all of its nuances. And I will email that as part of my updated questions after this session.
Okay, the only issue that I see with that, because I try to go that route, I'm like trying to look for options and playing around with the system. The issue that I have with that is that, let's say I set the default grade, all the students get 25, and then I'm gonna proceed and actually read and grade and potentially change maybe the grade of 7 students. But what about if those 7 students logged in and saw their 25? And then when I grade it, it goes out to 18. That's the catch with that approach.
Great question. So you can mute an assignment. Okay. So if you come in, same buttons, you can come in and you can hide grades.
Okay.
Until you're done.
Okay.
So if you choose hide grades, it's going to give you this window at the top to talk about that. And basically what it will do is it will hide everyone's grade until you're done.
Okay.
So you could hide the grades on that assignment until you're done. And then, and then set the default grade and then go in and adjust. And then what you would do is when you're done with all of the changing that you're going to do, you can come back and let me see. Grades have been hidden for this test student. So then you should be able to come back in
Okay, yeah, that's great. I didn't know
And-
you could mute just
and
one
unhide.
assignment.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. That will work for now for large classes. Thank you.
Absolutely. You bet. You bet. We've got about 3 more minutes before I'm going to put you into breakout rooms and be able to chat with your colleagues. Any other overall questions that you want to ask when we're in a big group? All righty. So like all good learning, questions beget questions, right? And having the opportunity to dialogue with others is a great way to make meaning of information. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through really quickly your discussion protocol. And what we're going to do with the rest of our time together is we're going to whisk you affectionately into breakout rooms for about 15 minutes worth of time, 12 to 15 minutes. And you're going to be in a group of 3 people. So you, 2 others, as mathematically possible as that is. And with deep appreciation to Rebecca, who's now like, 3 people in a group, making it all work. She's making the magic happen at this moment. So what you're going to do in your group of 3 is that you're going to go in sets of 4 minutes. Choose one person to go first. Have somebody with a timer, using your cell phone, watching the clock, whatnot. But person 1 who goes, you get 2 minutes. And just share out some of your thinking, right? What's something you've learned in the session so far? What are some questions that you have? What next steps are you considering? 2 minutes. Whatever you want to talk about from what we've learned today. Help cement that knowledge through dialogue. And then after your 2 minutes, the whole group has 2 minutes of open discussion time. So think of that first person as sort of opening a discussion space. They share for 2 minutes, and then the whole group talks for 2 minutes. Then the next participant gets 2 minutes to share what they've learned, what questions they have, next steps, and then the whole group gets 2 more minutes to talk. And then finally, third group member gets to share 2 minutes. Whole group shares 1 more time for 2 minutes. And that's how we'll structure our discussion time. Having a discussion protocol is really important to make sure all the voices get a chance to be heard, right? It's a great way to approach large-scale discussions in classes, is to say, let's use that timer to be our friend and make sure everybody gets their 2 minutes to surface what they took. That's going to help make a really rich space for that open dialogue. So 2 minutes for someone to share, 2 minutes of open dialogue to follow, swap roles twice more. On our Google document are our community agreements with each other, those norms, right? So they're just a great moment for me to invite you back to those as you get into those small groups to chat with each other. After you've had your time to chat, we'll come back together as a group and you'll have some more time to fill out that table, your gots, your needs, your next steps. So use your partnerships in your group to talk things out and help you think about what's next for you. How might you use these tools? What are you thinking about as you continue your learning? How we doing, Rebecca? You ready to rock and roll?
I'm ready.
All right. With that, folks, we're going to launch you into those discussion rooms. You should get an invitation, right, Rebecca, that they click on? All right, you're going to get an invitation that says you've been invited to. Would you like to go? And please say yes, right? Your groupies are waiting for you, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Have a great time. So as you transition back to being with us, look at all those faces. Oh, it's so good to see your faces. Makes it more human, right? Makes us feel like we're here with each other in this digital space, but not so far from each other. I'm going to direct your eyeballs to a few resources But we're not quite done. I want you to have a chance to go back to that table. So this is a quick point, and I'll point again as we get to the end of our time together. So a couple more questions that came up in our whole group session, right? Kind of overall changes to the gradebook. Session 1 materials are going to be really helpful for lots of questions about how to change the gradebook, what you can do on your end to adjust that. And if you're wondering where to find those, every one of our sessions, you have a whole library. If you come down here to page 10 in our Google Doc, the resources for the Canvas gradebook and feedback series, there's a link. And it will take you to an entire library I'm building for you, organized by session. So just know that that's there. You can go back to everything from part 1. The only thing that's not there yet is the video. But everything else is there. There was another question about annotation. Don't worry, annotation needs its own time. So it gets its own time in its own session, which is session 4. So that's coming. It was just a little teaser today to know that you can do that, but it is coming in our 4th session. I'll show you some more resources in a minute, but I really want to make sure that you take the time to get back to this table, right? You've built knowledge, and I want you to have that opportunity to crystallize that for yourself. So let's go back to that table on your own Google document. If you can scroll yourself back up to the top. Thanks to our amazing amount of participants, we have 6 pages of that table. It crawls its way onto page 6. If you can find yourself in there and add something, right? Maybe that means you're adding something to the box on the right. What's next? Now that you've got some things and you had some questions, maybe you've got some next steps you want to articulate for yourself, name into being. Right? The best way to get those steps happening is to say what they are, right? Next, I'm going to do this. But maybe what's next for you is to say what you got. You want to talk a little bit more about what you gained. Add that to your got table. Maybe you've got some new questions. Add those to your needs table. And if you would please, while you're typing, let us know your preference on whether you give us permission to share what you put in here with all of you, our 3CSN network. We just got done writing our newsletter for the last year of learning together we've done as a network. It was a very large undertaking. There's so much we do, right? And we find that we as 3CSN coordinators can talk about what the network does for learners, but that's not as moving and inviting and supportive as when the network speaks to each other, right? When folks can read what their colleagues through these sessions are learning and doing and thinking. And so if you're comfortable sharing what you put in here with the network so that it can show up again, potentially in those learning briefs or those newsletters that we put out, go ahead and put a Y or yes. And if you're like, yeah, not so much for me, no thanks, let us know that so we can respect your decisions. Just put an N in there. And that way, either way, we can honor what your preferences are. But there are a few more powerful things than reading about what it means to learn together, right? Where folks are. It helps us feel like we're doing this together, which we are. As we approach our last minutes together, again, I just want to point you to some things that will be there for you when you're ready for them. They're in this Google document. Okay. I added the Canvas guide for how to add a default grade in Canvas. If you want to learn more about that, I just popped it right in. While you were busy dialoguing with each other, I just went and found it and dropped it right in here for you. So that resource is now in, amongst others, on page 8. For folks who might not have been with us last week, just another shout out. In this resource guides for Canvas feedback features, middle one down is Nicole's guide for students to help them access their grades and feedback. If you've not yet taken a look at that, sometime between now and next week, I'd invite you to click on that. It's a document for you, and it's a document for you to give to your students. You can download it. You can use it with your students. It walks them step by step how to see all that feedback you're giving them when they go to their gradebook. because it's not the most intuitive process for our students at all. It's not intuitive at all. On page 11, lots of additional resources for you. Our overall website, our design lab started this week. What you're in right now, in many ways, is a design lab. You're in a multi-week in-depth learning experience. We've got a lot of those that are starting up as we hit this midpoint in our fall. Come check out what we've got. We'd love to have you sign up for one of those and deeply learn with us. Frequently asked questions documents, support Padlets, which is this community sourced learning space where you can add to it, learn from others, share our collective expertise and knowledge. Our survey is up here if you've not yet taken our survey, or if you haven't taken it in a while, we'd love to hear what you think. It helps guide what we do. And my email address is there as well. You'll probably get an email from me on Friday, just so that you know I'm thinking about you. If there's anything else new I've thought to send your way, I'll send it to you. Keeps us connected from week in to week out. Next week is rubrics. So we'll be digging into all things rubric-like together. I want to be respectful of your time. So we are there. We've arrived. You are welcome to continue to engage with this Google document. The easiest way to do that for yourself is if you look on your own Google document and you look to the right, you should see 3 icons, a star, something that looks like a recycle symbol, and a cloud. Click on the thing that looks like a recycle symbol or a triangle. That tells Google that you would like to paperclip this document into your Google Docs so that you can easily find it. It's tremendously helpful if you've got 10,000 Google Docs out there. So just let Google know you want this sticky noted to your drive. Makes it easier to find later. I hope you have yourself a wonderful, wonderful Wednesday, a great week. Keep thinking about all the ways in which you can build that bridge between what you observe in a student's work at the moment and where you want them to get, right? How can your words and your influence, which they take so seriously, be that bridge that moves them from where they are to where they could be? And how can Canvas and feedback help you get there? And we'll just keep learning from each other week in and week out. And we'll see you next Wednesday, same time, 10 to 11:30 for rubrics.